Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
Hi everyone, welcome to the OnCourse Podcast. OnCourse is a creative and alternate education company that aims to bridge the gap between formal classroom education and real-world skills. We offer a range of programs from short skill-based courses to test prep to application assistance for those who are looking to study abroad. My name is Alisha Mashruwala and I'm the CEO and co-founder at OnCourse. I graduated from Harvard University with a degree in psychology and a minor in economics.
Hi guys, my name is Akhil Daswani. I'm your co-host for today. I'm a graduate of Northwestern University and the COO and co-founder of OnCourse.
So today we're going to talk a lot about financing your education in the US specifically. So at the undergraduate level, the master's level, and from a PhD angle as well. So Akhil, why don't we just begin? Why don't you tell us what the damage is when you're going to study abroad?
Oh, the damages are quite heavy actually. So on the undergrad front, actually for me to explain that, we'll have to break up the types of universities you have in the US. So there's two types of universities, right? So private universities, which are privately funded, and state universities, which are state funded. The privately funded universities at an undergrad level will typically cost you anywhere between $65,000 to $75,000 over a year for a 4-year course. And a state university can cost anywhere between $35,000 all the way up to $55,000 per year, again, for a 4-year course. At a master's level, some courses can vary for as low as $35,000, and it can range up all the way up to your MBA courses, which are $85,000, $90,000. And master's courses in the US generally are 2-year programs.
All right. And so in that regard, just, someone can't afford it, or what are the ways that you can actually pay for your education? Yeah,
I mean, it's easily fathomable why someone couldn't afford it, especially if you convert it into rupees, it's an absurd amount of money, right? But generally, when people are looking to find sources for funding outside of their own family or themselves, there's 5 main sources of funding, right? So one is to obviously go get a sponsor. So get an uncle, get a grandparent, and just have them sponsor your education because they love you a lot. That could be difficult, right? The second one is where we chase the universities for scholarships. Now, scholarships are usually merit-based, right? So that totally depends on how well you've done, how academically brilliant you are. And the third type is aid, which is, again, it's a whole different can of worms we can go into. And the fourth type is loans, right? And loans can be coming from different sources. Can be coming from your bank, can be coming from the government, can be coming from private sources, can be coming from the school. And finally, there's something called work study, which is where you find a way to actually work on campus to actually pay off part of your tuition.
When it comes down to something like scholarships, for example, so are there different types of scholarships? What does someone have to do to actually get a scholarship? And, just if you can just give us some insight into, how much scholarship you can get as well.
So scholarship is completely merit-based, right? So just think of it from a perspective of, if I'm applying to a School X and School X has a certain academic level, I need to be that much above that academic level in order to justify getting scholarship, right? In general, colleges want to give scholarships to international students, but you just need to be that much better. The other thing is, so besides you getting money and scholarships from school, there are a lot of private bodies that actually do this. So in fact, the Tatas have a very good scholarship at Cornell. The Ambanis have a very good scholarship at Stanford. It's just that people need to have knowledge of these scholarships and apply for it well in advance, right? Like, for example, Boston University has a scholarship deadline that's well before their application deadlines. So as long as people find out, at point of application, they are eligible to be applying for these kind of scholarships, and there's no impact on their admission. I feel everyone should always apply for scholarship, no matter how much you can afford, because it has no damage to your application whatsoever,
And these private bodies that you talk about, like your Tatas or, the Mahindra Scholarship and all of the others that you hear of, are they open mainly for them at the master's level, or is it a lot at the undergrad level as well?
So you have a few at the undergrad level, but a majority of them tend to be focused on the master's level simply because they're very focused on research. So even for master's types of scholarships, you typically will find a lot of the focus going towards science, STEM-based, research-based master's programs. You'll very rarely find too many scholarships for an MBA, right? Because they believe, the MBAs will eventually come out and pay for themselves so they can afford to go take a loan. Whereas someone who's chasing a PhD, they have a lot of study, so they need that scholarship, right? So a lot of the scholarships that you see will be geared towards master's research programs.
So is there anything different that you have to do when you're applying for a scholarship? Is there a different process altogether?
So there is. Usually, most master's scholarships or even undergrad scholarships will generally have separate applications. So in certain cases, separate essays. In certain cases, declaration of your own current finances. And usually, sometimes they even have different stages which they go through. So there might be an interview stage, and only, especially if you're looking at the full tuition scholarship where it's 100%, they really only choose a few people. So they want to make sure they choose the right profiles as well.
So what's the difference then between the scholarship and aid bit?
What I was telling you about scholarship was it had no impact on your application. Aid is slightly different. The first thing is the point of consideration of aid is not just merit-based, it's need-based. So they're looking at all your financial documentation, and of course at the undergraduate level, it's mostly your parents, right? Because you really can't afford anything at that point. There's two types of schools. There's need-blind schools and need-based schools when it comes to aid. Need-blind schools, which are only 4 schools in the US, and that's Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Williams College. And what they say is, if you're good enough to get into my school, I will give you whatever it is that you ask for, right? Obviously, your income has to be within a certain bracket. And what that basically says is you applying for aid has no impact on your admissions. However, every other school where you apply for aid, you get put into a separate pile. And those are the need-based schools, right? And what that means is your chances have taken a hit from point 1. So the minute you've asked for aid, you have a slight disadvantage to someone who hasn't. But of course, the thing is, at the end of the day, if you're looking to get money from colleges, this is where most of the money comes from, especially at an undergraduate level. At a master's level, most of the money will come through scholarships or grants and those kind of things. At an undergrad level, a lot of the money that colleges keep aside is generally in the form of financial aid.
And so in terms of, you said financial aid, the need-based type of financial aid, do you see a lot of students getting financial aid? Is it common, or is it more just at the need-blind places?
When we started OnCourse, I remember the dollar was at 50 and the cost of education was at $55,000. So it cost about 25 lakhs or 30 lakhs a year. Today we're at $70,000 and the dollar's at 70. So it's gone from 30 lakhs like 5 years ago to 50 lakhs today. So it's been a huge jump, right? So what people could afford easily before is suddenly not that affordable anymore. And I actually feel like even those who can afford it have started asking for aid simply because it's a prudent philosophy. Of course, the one thing to remember is their chances do take a slight hit at schools where they normally may have gotten in, which means, of course, they may have to compromise a little bit on the brand name or the college name. But, besides that, I think we've definitely seen an uptick in how many people are asking for aid.
And are there any colleges that you feel like, geared towards giving international students more financial aid over others, or is it just more general? So,
yeah, definitely, right? So, like, if you think about the well-known universities, right, like your BUs or your USCs or your UPenns or the ones which we all know about and talk about, right, they're less likely to give international students financial aid simply because they get enough people who apply there willing to pay full. Right? So the colleges that actually want to give international students financial aid are those that want to attract international students because they don't have that many international students to begin with. So those tend to be the smaller liberal arts colleges. So think of your Williams, your Amhersts, your Swarthmores, your Claremont McKenna's, your McAllisters, your Carleton colleges, your Grinnells. These are colleges which you and I may never have heard of before. But they're very good education. They provide a really solid education, really good. They're very small usually. They're usually away from a city, and their facilities and their the kind of student attention that they give is tremendous.
So that's, I guess, the aid on like the undergraduate front. So what about financial aid on the postgraduate level? Does that concept differ? Is it less frequently available?
Oh, it's definitely less frequently available. Like I said, most of the money that you will get at a master's level will be in the form of scholarship or a grant or some kind of, private aid, essentially. But financial aid from a college is a very rare aspect at a master's level. So, if you're looking to apply for a PhD or a master's program in the US, hunt for those scholarships. And there are lots of them, right? Like, so really, really hunt for them. Some are small, some are big. Apply for as many as possible. Because unlike the undergrad front, where it's a very structured aid process, at the master's front, it's a little disjointed and it's very scholarship driven.
So how do you calculate it? Like, what's the process to apply for financial aid?
So it's a little bit of a numerical nightmare sometimes, but essentially financial aid is based on how much the college thinks you can afford, which means that you have to declare your complete income, which is exactly as per your income tax returns. You have to declare any business income you have, any investment income you have, any savings you have. You have to estimate yearly expenses, based on which you demonstrate how much you think you will be willing to pay every year. The college goes through the forms, looks through the numbers in depth. There's obviously a deep calculation that goes into this, which we usually work our clients through. And once you kind of, get that number sorted out, the college will first look at, do you fall into my minimum income bracket? Because that's the first place they start. And then they look at, okay, how much disposable income does this family have? And can they actually afford to pay the amount they're saying? That's the other problem, right? So people then show too little money and they say, okay, I really can't afford much, but you're still willing to pay a lot. That's an automatic disqualification of admission. So you want to be very careful of that as well, right? But the most important thing is to make sure that you show enough of a buffer, but yet, you're able to kind of demonstrate that you're able to pay it, but you're not able to pay the entire amount.
And since aid, you said, is more frequent at an undergraduate level, what's the average amount of financial aid that someone could potentially get?
I think the average package which we've seen has usually been about 50 or 60% of the cost of attendance. So usually about $35,000 to $40,000 a year is what someone can expect.
That's pretty good, actually.
It is actually really good. But, of course, there are cases where we've seen people get aid up to like 80 or 90%. Again, that depends on their income status. It doesn't depend on how good a student they are. You can be a really bright student, well above average, but if your parents' income statements are too high, you won't qualify for the full financial aid.
Then I guess chances are you'd qualify for a scholarship, which is more merit-based instead.
Yeah, of course. And that, again, is in no one's hand except the colleges, right?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So just a little bit, so now that's the financial aid bit. You talked about loans a lot as well. So what kind of loans are available in India, outside of India, just a general idea of that?
So, yeah, of course, the loan market's been booming recently, right? Like with the onset of like Credila and a lot of the financial institutions. So, with education loans in India, of course, the interest rates are quite exorbitant, and usually they range from about 10 to 12%, if not even higher, depending on where the rates are at that point. So, of course, those who want to take it, I know a lot of these institutions, if you're admitted to very good universities, may even provide a certain amount of your loan amount collateral free. Otherwise, most of it is usually backed by some form of collateral, usually from a parent or a close guardian. And of course, the interest payments have to go on, right from point of dispersal. There's another way to get a loan, which is to actually take a loan from the US itself, right? Now, if I'm applying to the US, and let's say I have a very close family member there, let's say I have an aunt and uncle who's willing to co-sign a loan for me at a US financial institution, like a bank or something like that, I can actually avail of a loan from the US at a US interest rate. But of course, the co-signer, whoever that person is, acts as a guarantor. So if I don't pay the loan, they are then held financially responsible. So, the person has to be a very close, family, either in your family or a very close friend.
So in terms of the loans, are they more frequent, I guess, at the postgrad level? Because I would assume with the undergraduates going, the return on investment may not be as much to pay off a loan.
Yeah, so if you ever speak to a financial institution in India especially, they'll tell you that most of the education loans are from the master's applicants. Simply because I think up until this point, if you look at the number of students who go abroad for their masters, is just about 10 times more than those who go abroad for their undergrad. But I do see a lot of them now trying to provide loans to those who are going for the undergrad as well. Because, for example, today I can afford to pay only a certain amount. My financial aid package hasn't worked out exactly as I would have liked. Let's say I'm just in a cash crunch for this time being. The loan can help me kind of tide over also.
So good option overall, you would say.
Yeah, definitely a good option. Of course, you have to weigh out the cost of interest and see, where it really makes sense. Another unique thing is some of the colleges themselves, as part of your aid package, may give you some amount of it as loan, which is usually paid back after you graduate. So that's a very helpful amount you can get. Although those will range from about $5,000 to $10,000 only.
Okay. And so, can students work on campus to kind of, cover some of their costs, whether it's living, whether it's tuition, whether it's personal expenses?
Yeah, actually, this is one of the most underutilized ways for people to get money from colleges, right? So colleges provide a unique opportunity for international students to actually work on campus for as much as 20 hours a week. And minimum wage being close to, $8 to $10 in most states, that's about $175 to $200 that you can make every week, which over a 30-week period really adds up, right? That's about $6,000 extra that you could get and at least pay off your personal, whatever expenses that you may have. Now, how do you do that? You can take jobs at the library, you can take jobs in the cafes on campus, you can take jobs, IT jobs. I remember I took a job when I was on campus coaching squash, and it paid really well. And it's one of those things which I feel like people didn't understand or didn't realize that they could do. Right. The other way that you can get money from colleges is to actually apply to be something called a resident associate. So every college or every college dorm usually has these RAs who are think of them like your hall monitors, who essentially are in charge of the responsibility, or they're responsible for the well-being of their residents on the floor. So, and in order to take on that charge, they get free room and free food, for a full year. That saves about $15,000 to $20,000 a year at most colleges, which again is a lot of money. And just because people don't know about it, they don't even end up applying for this sort of stuff. So that's the other thing which I think, people can do. And finally, those who are into slightly more science-based fields or economics or those kind of things can actually partake in some kind of research on campus. And usually there are a lot of research opportunities which are paid opportunities, which international students can take part in. And usually that could pay, again, between $5,000 to $7,000 a year. And finally, I think your summer internships, usually they don't pay too much, and it's usually for the experience and for the resume, but they pay a substantial amount. If you compare that to how much you would typically get paid in India, it's a good amount.
But I guess summer internships are also slightly harder to get because it's more like a longer application-based process versus an on-campus job, which may not require too much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but of course they pay better than an on-campus job.
Yeah, of course, that's also true. So all of this, I guess, works for internationals, but does this differ if you're a US citizen applying from an international country?
So a US citizen, say a US citizen applying from India, slightly different. Yes, it is. Scholarships-wise, exactly the same in the sense you're eligible for the same types of scholarships. From financial aid perspective, totally different, because a lot of the schools that are need-based for international students might become need-blind for US citizens, and a fair share of them actually do. And the policy obviously varies from college to college, because certain schools, even though you're a US citizen but you're studying in an international country, may not classify you in the US citizen pile. So this has to be checked with each university, but a large number of them actually open up. So what that means is I can, as a US citizen, with no fear of rejection or no fear of, my application for aid affecting my admission, just apply to more colleges for aid. And that's what a lot of our clients who are US citizens end up doing.
That's interesting, actually. So I think this covers a lot about the financing education bit in the US. Thank you so much, Akhil, for giving us all this input.
No, absolutely. It was always fun. And, I understand that, it's a very tedious process for parents to pay for their kids' education, and I think if they're able to use any of these small little tips and try to make the most of the scholarships and the aid opportunities available, they can definitely find a cheaper alternative.
Great. Thanks, everyone. If you have any more questions or if you just want to get in touch with us, you can contact us on www.oncourseglobal.com. You could also email us on info@oncourseglobal.com or follow us on Facebook or Instagram as well.
Hey man, just help me out, man. I need some podcasts, man. I haven't had a fix in a week. Just need some.
Don't you worry about it. I got podcasts galore for you, man. Just go to ivmpodcast.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thanks, man. I'm gonna check it out.